good afternoon, evening, depending on what you're into, what time of day you think it is. Who knows these days? Welcome to another San Diego Media Pros meeting. We're so glad that you're here joining us today. We have a great topic about getting back to work here in San Diego and COVID precautions, and we're going to hear from some experts later in the program who have been doing this, that have been continuing to work, continuing to find creative ways to follow the state and local guidelines while still being able to serve clients and do creative work. We're going to hear from some folks from the city and their role in all of this. But first, as we like to start all of our meetings with relevant news from the industry. And there's no one better at compiling that and bringing that to us every month than Mr. Mark Mazenev. So Mark, take it away with news you can use.
Alrighty, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for that intro. I wish I could bring you great news today. You know, there's a whole bunch of new stuff out there, but with COVID, we figure why not just keep it on some of the serious stuff. So what I want to chat with you today about is the where we are on AB5 and kind of that part. Yeah, it's everyone's favorite topic, but it is important to just set the stage. And I want to go in the past, present, and future and sort of tell you how we got to where we are and kind of where we sort of are at this point as we go through this. So understand, this is our disclaimer, nothing that I'm going to tell you. I don't want you to run out there and say, well, Mark said and SD Media Pros said. So understand, this is for informational use only. It's pretty accurate, but you can do your own research to be sure. All right. So also in compiling this, there's a couple of links here, and we're hoping to get these into the chat that you can look up and follow along and look at some of these. These are some great links that helped me create what I was able to pull together on this. So with AB5 being so prominent in what we do, I thought I'd just lay it out here on the past and understand how we got where we are. So prior to April of 18, our law here in California really revolved around a California Supreme Court decision about the Borrello test, which is a 13-part multi-factor test that really look for your right to control a person.
The screen you're sharing is sharing just your setup.
Yeah, we're not seeing your presenter view.
Screen.
And you have the wrong year.
All right, let me stop it and see where we are. I'll try that again. Share screen. PowerPoint. Let's try this.
And the links are in the chat for folks that would like the links that you mentioned, Mark.
Did that link up better?
Click the swap displays button up at the top of the screen.
All right, hang on here.
There we go.
Is that it?
Yep.
Yep.
Better?
Yeah.
Yeah, we got good to go.
Let's see if we got. So, anyway, so we begin with the. In April 2018 was a Borrello test, and the Borrello test was a 13-part multi-factor test that looked at the right to control, who controls the individual, and it was of varying degrees in this 13-part test. Then in April 30th, the Dynamex case came out versus the Superior Court, and it ultimately rejected the Borrello test as this only method, and came into it the idea of this Martinez and Combs, this idea of what it defines as an employee, to employ somebody. And it's from here that drove this 3-part ABC test as on January 20th, the Assembly bill codified this dynamics decision that kind of did away with the common law Borrello test as the main method and instead added this ABC independent contractor status, which is what everybody talks about here. Letting you're an independent contractor, not an employee, if A, the person is free from the control, direction, of the hiring entity, B, the person performs work that's outside the usual course of the hiring entity's business, and C, the person is usually engaged in an independently established trade. It's B that tends to get everybody in our industry, tends to get everybody in most industries. That's the tricky animal within AB5. And if you can't meet all three, you are an employee. That's kind of where we are in the present here. As originally written, it included a number of job category exemptions and professional service exemptions, but no one ever said how they arrived at them. There was never a list. Nobody could say how they got at these odd ones here. And it created a healthy conversation of left out professions as to why they were excluded. So on September 4th, the Assembly Bill 2257 was passed, which amended AB 5 and included more professions to correct some of the ambiguities. But again, no methodology was presented as to how the professions were chosen. Okay, so nobody knew really how these got there. And in granting these exemptions, the AB 5 allows the classification question to revert back to Borrello to determining contractor status in a number of cases. So this the Borrello test that features those 13 factors are the considerations. But the exempted professions must still clear another 6 factors before the Borrello test can be used. And those factors include the hiring maintains a business location. The individual has a business license of some sort. The individual has the ability to set or negotiate their own rates. Outside of the project completion dates, reasonable hours, you can set your own hours. The individual is customarily engaged in the same type of work performed under contract with another hiring entity, and the individual customarily and regularly exercises discretion in the judgment of those services. So you got to meet the ABC, and then you got to meet all these to start getting. You can see why this gets to be bogged down. Now, one of the things everyone's talking about is a business-to-business exemption that does exist within AB 5 that allows for the Borrello test in contracting relationships, but then you have to satisfy 12 conditions. These include the business provider free for, I don't keep boring you, the business provider services free to direct contracting businesses. The contract business services in writing. Your work is performed in a jurisdiction that requires this. The business provider maintains a business location that is separate. There are 12 of these conditions that you have to look at. And I don't want to bore you all, but it becomes very difficult in the business-to-business exemption to hit them. Generally speaking, if you looked at all of these, they can work for business-to-business exemptions. And that's where a lot of folks think that might be a way where my company can work with Robin's company, and we can have a business-to-business exemption, and therefore I'm an independent contractor, and we don't have to worry about any of those things. That's what people are thinking right now on how this might work. However, I'm encouraging you to read the reports and the texts of the bills, okay? There's lots of if-then situations you need to know about. It's full of them. It's an assembly bill. It's written by politicians. It is hard, tough reading. It is go to sleep reading if you want to do that, because it will put you to sleep. There's a lot of stuff in there, but I encourage you to look at the bill and the language of both bills, AB 5, AB 2257 as well. Note that as far as I can tell, AB 5 has yet to be tested in any court case where an independent contractor is challenged a classification. And those classifications come from the EDD, so it's the EDD you have to get through, and everybody knows how easy it is to get through the EDD to ask questions. That's easy. Piece of cake. Just give them a call. They're just hanging around doing nothing today. The business-to-business exemption has yet to be ruled on by the EDD. So whether that holds up or not is unknown. I know Eric Addison and myself were going back and forth a while back with someone on Facebook about this, and they're saying, look, that business-to-business exemption, even that's in there, is not working. It is not working. Now, I want to reach out to that person to do more research, but currently that's what it is. So whether the business-to-business exemption works has yet to be ruled on, and it's tough to know that. Prop 22, the Uber and Lyft exemption proposition, it will not overturn AB 5. Some people think, well, if that came out, then obviously AB 5 is going to fall, and that's not true. In fact, there are currently challenges to Prop 22 even to try to get that overturned. Attempts to repeal AB 5 have been and remain unsuccessful. So no matter what you may think or read about, nothing is going on right now that of major concern that is trying to get this done. And finally, the PRO Act, which is Protecting the Right to Organize Act, passed by the U.S. House of Representatives in February of 2020, seeks, among other things, to make this ABC test a national standard. So the out-of-state questions that will come up, and can you hire people from out of state, and can people work here, can we work there, that may all become a moot point as the ABC test becomes a national standard for the National Labor Relations Board as they codify what being an employee is. So AB 5 is here to stay. It's not going anywhere, at least right now. and how to work it is still remains a question, as it's still only a year old, and this thing called COVID came up and has really thrown everything into the works. So it's even difficult now to know going forward with even a little bit of work anyway what that's going to mean. But AB5, just be aware, it's here. We'll keep you up to date on that every few months and just let you know what's happening. So that's our news you can use right now for January 2021.
Thank you very much, Mark. Yep, not all news is a laughing matter or something that's easy to make jokes about. This is obviously a very fluid and ongoing situation as legislation continues to change, as legal challenges come up, such as Mark said. So we're all doing our best to keep current, and that's something that we try to do here at SD Media Pros. So now what I'd like to do is introduce our president, Jane Hare, for her to transition us into the next part of our presentation here tonight. So Jane Hare, without further ado, over to you.
Thank you, Robin. Hi, everybody, and welcome to the January 2021 SD Media Pros meeting. I'm Jane Hare. I'm the president of SD Media Pros, and we are absolutely thrilled that you are here spending part of your day with us. Before we get started, I want to do a quick thank you and shout out to our board of directors. They're the ones who keep the wheels turning, including Robin Martin, our vice president, who you just heard from. Thank you, Robin. He's really kind of my partner in crime on this, so thank you for all you do for the organization. And then also thank you to Bob Unger, who's our CFO, Jeff Trober, who's our webmaster and is actually our interim secretary as we are looking to fill that position. Also Kevin Marty, who's our membership chair, David Rains, who's in charge of technology, Mark Masonov, who does news you can use, which usually does bring a smile to your face, but not necessarily tonight. Tom Kinnaman, who is our guru of streaming and doing all of the details behind the scenes. Rich Varville, and also Michael Wood, who is taking over our social media. So I think you're going to start to see some additional posts from us. And in fact, make sure you're following us on LinkedIn and Facebook and on Instagram. And we may be looking to connect with you. So hopefully when we send you an invite to connect, you will accept that. So thank you. And another thank you to say thank you for filling out the survey. We sent out a survey via email in, I believe, the middle of December. We received about 50 responses, which is incredible. And not just like quick and easy, we love you responses. We got thoughtful ideas for what we can do with the organization, what we might do for programming this year. And Robin, I'm going to turn it over to you for a second. Give us just a quick summary of what we're learning. We're still going through the results, but what did we find out?
Yeah, we really want to use the survey as an opportunity to hear sort of what's top of mind for you as you're looking forward in this year for your business or for your professional growth, what sort of challenges you see, what things you think SD Media Pros would be well positioned to help you with. So we heard a lot of great feedback on potential topics and areas of interest. As we just saw with the AB5 update, there's a lot of sort of legal questions people have on how they should be organizing their business, LLC, sole prop, et cetera. Different ways to kind of market and interact with social media, because we know that's a changing landscape and people are always trying to stay current with what's effective. There's always the strong technical contingent that wants to know what's latest with cameras and lights and sound gear and all that kind of stuff. NAB is not necessarily going to be in person this year or again anytime soon. We'll have to see what that looks like. So we usually try to bring some updates from the trade shows as well. So suffice to say, we have a lot of really good information, and we are actively using that information as we develop programming for the rest of this year. So your feedback is being used, and you should see the fruits of that as we progress through 2021.
Well, and speaking of that, Mark Masonov, what do you plan for February? Give us just a quick summary of what the topic is for Thursday, February 27th.
That is right. Well, Jane, believe it or not, our February meeting has been a year in the making. And what I mean by that is that a year ago, we were not producing and shooting like we are. But now, as a result of what's happening on, we are going to talk about remote virtual production and how the shift from live to virtual has become the norm and the challenges this new normal presents. And on deck is Dave Schutte, the owner and lead producer at Voice and Video, who will discuss how he's approached this live production in lieu of doing it virtually. We're also looking to have a representative from Telestream, makers of Wirecast, who will talk about how their system helps make this new normal possible. And speaking of normal, let me introduce now Mr. Tom Kinnaman, who will talk to us about March's meeting. Tom?
Well, thank you, Mark. And let me get some of my things out of the way here. But so in March, I reached out to Ripple Training. And lo and behold, Steve Martin, who started the company, and you may be familiar with Ripple Training. He's done a number of training programs. It started back in 1999, and he was originally focused on Final Cut Pro, but now he does training for Apple Motion, DaVinci Resolve, and some aspects of Blackmagic Design. And then for the meeting, he requested specifically if we could just ask him questions so he could field a bunch of questions. And so the couple that I'm curious about is that how he originally got into training and how did he get certified and what led him to founding his own company. And so think about that a little bit. We've got an opportunity to have quite the pro on hand to talk to us about training. You know, if you have products that you want to get into training, he may be able to help with that. How do you form your company in that way? I'm really looking forward to March. It's the fourth Wednesday on the 24th of March.
Jane, you're muted. There you go.
Yes, there we go. There was some noise, so I was trying to not be interruptive. Robin, then after that, what do we have coming up in the couple of months after that?
I'm sorry, I don't have that list in front of me. I was focused on survey stuff, so we'll just have to keep people in suspense for a little bit longer.
We're going to keep everybody in suspense. But let me tell you that when the board met at our annual meeting earlier in January, we were looking at the survey results and picked the first 6 topics for this year to be specifically tied to what you wanted to know about. So keep your eye on the newsletter and on our social media pages, and we will keep you well informed about what's on the schedule. We generally meet on the 4th Wednesday of the month. This February is just an exception. Next month is an exception. So, but let's move on now and talk about what's really top of mind tonight, and that is COVID-19 and safety on set. And thank you, everybody, for being here. We have pulled together a really fabulous panel. I first thought about doing this meeting back in the fall, and I reached out to Brandy Shimabukuro, the City of San Diego's filming program manager and film liaison. And I think everybody in production knows who Brandy is, just because of her important role here. But when I said to her, that we wanted to do this topic, she said, here's who you should try to get. You should try to get someone from Helium Films, from 10 Stories, and from San Diego Productions. They are 3 production companies who are working, have kept busy through some of this period of pandemic, and are doing it right. So she really was holding up these 3 companies as examples of best practices, and I was able to get all of them. We were able to find a date when it worked for everyone. So joining us tonight, in addition to Brandy, is Thierry Denis, a filmmaker, producer, and commercial director from Helium Films. Robert Craighead, who is founder and executive creative director of 10 Stories. and Rick Drake, who is the owner and founder of San Diego Productions, and Lisa Drake, who's the CFO and production coordinator, also from San Diego Productions. And Lisa is a certified COVID compliance officer, as we saw in her badge, if you joined us a little while ago. And then we also are interested in hearing from some of you who've been working on shoots recently, so we can hear what your experience has been. And as we start the discussion, just a reminder that San Diego Media Pros is an educational nonprofit. COVID can be a topic that is sometimes controversial, and we want to avoid talking about this from a political point of view. We're going to talk about this from an educational point of view. What do we need to do in order for all of us to stay safe personally and for us to keep one another safe? Because we really are a community, and we need to keep working together. So just to set the stage a little bit, as we all know, COVID is a serious and deadly disease. And even with the best of safety procedures, there are no guarantees. We owe it to ourselves, our colleagues, and to our industry to make wise decisions. And tonight, we're going to talk about safety and risk management. And know that this is a fluid situation. Just 2 days ago, on Monday, California ended our most recent regional stay-at-home order, which means that things may change a little. And then as of yesterday, new guidelines came out of LA that actually sort of strengthen the importance of COVID testing. So we're not going to get into the details of that, but just know that it's like every day, every week, this is changing. So I thought we might start with a quick look at a year ago. And I wondered for whoever wants to jump in, when we all became aware of coronavirus in mid-March, were you in the middle of production, and what happened? Thierry, you want to start?
Yeah, sure. I had a shoot planned for, I want to say March 15 or something, that actually got pushed by a couple of weeks because it was raining, and it was for a sunglasses company. So obviously we needed sun. And it got pushed right at the very, very beginning of the lockdown. So we ended up not doing it and canceling it and postponing it to, I think we ended up shooting mid-May or early June, somewhere there. Yeah.
Now, you kind of jumped into action pretty quickly, though, and started doing some research and put together a COVID compliance policy for Helium Films. Want to tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. Well, I mean, like everybody else, I had a lot of time on my hand because, I couldn't go see anybody, get out of my house, right? And so one of the stuff that I was looking at is obviously I wanted to be able to shoot, business. You want to be able to provide your client services and make money, right? And so that was important to figure out ways to do that. And I felt like, at the very beginning, it was still up in the air what was needed and what could happen on set. But very early on, there's a lot of information still coming from all over the world, right? Because my very tiny, small, local San Diego company there's people all over the world that were in the same situation with probably a lot more at stake than I did, right? With much bigger shoot plans, with film plans. And so I feel, back then in March, there was already quite a bit of information, on filmmaker sites, on other production companies trying to figure out, how to do this properly. And so I remember reading an article about a movie in Iceland that was setting up bubbles. There were like color-coded armbands that would allow, people to stay within like a, 5-person pod and still continue doing things, right? And still continue shooting. There was, a lot of little examples like that all around the world that gave some insights on what could be done. And, between this and just the science that was available at the time, which really, in my opinion, hasn't changed that much. You knew from the get-go, it's something that goes in the air. So the farther you are, the better. The more ventilated the room is, the better. So if you're outside, it's the best. At that time, the only, I guess, things that may have evolved since was, touching surfaces. It was kind of unclear whether that was a vector of transmission or not. So then it was just about, trying to put my mind to, okay, I'm on set. This is what usually happens at any stage of the day of the process. What can we do to make it safer, along that available time?
Great, thank you. Rick, Lisa, how about you? Where were you in production when all of this happened, and how has it changed things?
Well, we were on a project, I think in Texas, and everything got kind of canceled. We had, I think, 3 or 4 different projects that
we had permits already in place in at least 4 different locations between Texas and Northern California. And we had, a lot of permits cost money. So we had to get refunds, and we didn't know how far we were pushing our productions out, because we obviously didn't know anything about what the future held. So all of our productions canceled, and I happened to be in the middle of a local production when the shutdown happened. Luckily, there was only 1 day left, and it was a really small crew on a private property. So we forged through. One person decided not to show up, which was totally fine. We just made it work. We were already doing a virtual thing with the clients. They weren't there. They were from the other part of the country, from the East Coast, and they decided not to come out for the shoot. So the photographer just led the shoot with minimal cast and crew, and we finished it out, and then everything shut down for us.
Robert, how about for you? Where were you in production when all of this took a turn?
Well, we had a couple fairly large projects, and like Thierry said, right before the shutdown, there was a week of rain, and we had to shoot rain out, and then that shoot just got pushed and pushed and pushed, and we ended up shooting that a couple months later, and we were able to because it was all outside. We were able to have a really small crew and do it outside. Another fairly large production got pushed to the summer as well. We went through, I'd say, 2 months with nothing production-wise. Luckily, we had some post-production projects which kept us busy, but yeah, it was pretty bleak. I mean, as everyone can attest. And the unknowns was hard to deal with at the time. As Thierry said, he went full forward on what can we do to get back to production, and that's what we did too. We really looked at what we need to do. How can we not only follow guidelines, but be even more stringent. So it's really about, I didn't want to get anyone sick. That was the biggest thing for me. We follow guidelines, but a lot of it's just yourself saying, okay, we're not going to do this. We're not going to have people stand close to each other. We're not going to have people touch each other's things, like C-stand here and there. We're just not going to do it. Our shoot day is going to be not twice as long, like 1.5 times as long, but that's what we have to do.
Thank you. Brandy, how about you? What you were in the middle of a number of things, I'm sure, when all of this started happening. What actions did the city take right away, and how did you get the set of guidelines put together relatively quickly?
So it's actually funny because I distinctly recall, as Rob's talking about the productions that got sidelined in March, I distinctly remember which one that was, because it was fairly large and it had a number of locations with traffic control and different elements. I think there was some drone filming as well.
That's right.
But there were a number of productions slated to happen. Traditionally March and October are the 2 busiest months for our office when it comes to permit churn out alone. And so the shutdown really truly happened on March 17th, and everything ground to a halt. At that point, there were a lot of unknowns and uncertainty about what things were going to look like and how long this was going to last. But we started having conversations with the county and other film commissions and film offices throughout the state of California, looking at what is production going to look like? And from a regulatory standpoint, what should it look like on our end? Because the thing that we always try to balance with the San Diego Film Office is we work with productions of all sizes. So you have, I don't know, I'm not keenly aware of what specific membership type and what your makeup is like for San Diego Media Pros, but we work with productions that are union signatories out of studios based out of LA or Atlanta or Toronto or who knows where. And we work with smaller independent productions that have cast and crew sizes of, 10 or less. And they fly pretty tight with their footprint size. So we knew that whatever guidelines we were going to put in place working with the county, they needed to be scalable based on that. That's why we'll go over what our supplemental guidelines are for the city, but that intent was always there, that it couldn't be so restrictive that a smaller production couldn't do it, or that it would be so expensive or the resources would be so much. But at the same time, you're also balancing the safety of your cast and crew and the surrounding community. So that was always top of mind. So March, everything shut down. We immediately started having conversations. We didn't get the green light from the state that they were going to announce a reopening of film production, the allowance of film production, until I think it was early June. So between that gap of mid-March to June, we were working with all the different stakeholders. And I had reached out to local productions here to say, best practices. This is what we're looking at eyeballing. Is this something that you think is fair? Is this something that you think would be scalable for productions here? And that's what ultimately resulted in us reopening. I think it was on June 9th or June 12th for production. During that time, we were keeping in conversation with Film LA, our counterparts up north of us, as well as the San Francisco Film Office. We're kind of the three largest film offices and commissions in the state, and really looking at how granular do we want to get in detail, and really what is also enforceable. That's kind of key. It's not like we have 50 billion Brandies who are going out to every single production, looking at the minutia of how often is the C-stand being cleaned, and walking around with a 6-foot meter, making sure everybody's physical distancing. So that was always top of mind as well.
Good, thank you. So Tom, can you allow Robin to, so we can see Robin's screen? So there has been a lot of guidance that has been released about working under COVID safety and COVID protocols. One of the first was the white paper that came out from the Alliance of Motion Picture and Television Producers. This is a lengthy document that really goes through the details of safety when it comes to COVID. It really set the stage for health and safety guidelines. And then Robin, if you'll go to the next slide, SAG-AFTRA released their guidelines in this document called the Safeway Forward, which was a joint report from SAG-AFTRA, IATSE, and the Teamsters committees. And this, again, a lengthy document. And this one talks a lot about working with actors. And if I'm remembering correctly, it goes into a lot of the details around zones and tiers, and just really thinking about safety of everyone, but especially those who are working and not able to wear a mask. And then locally, as Brandy was just starting to talk about, the City of San Diego Office of Special Events and Permitting started to release their own guidelines. And this, of course, is the Special Events and Filming website where you can find all of this detail. But I believe on the next slide, these are the City of San Diego filming guidelines, which were released, as Brandy was saying, on June 9th, 2020. And obviously, we don't expect you to be able to read those here, but they are available on the website. But Brandy, tell us a little bit about, and Robin, you may want to go into the next slide, the differences between the state, the county, and the city restrictions when it comes to COVID-19.
Right. Thanks. Thank you so much, Jane. So really, truly, we'll start at the top. The state of California, they defined the entertainment industry and all the workers supporting the entertainment industry as essential. So what does that mean for production? To be essential, that means that you are exempt from any gathering restrictions and stay-at-home orders that would apply to non-essential businesses and recreation. So ultimately what this means is the state allowed they said, we're not going to limit production sizes. We're not going to limit anything else besides just general COVID safety that any other member of the public would have to apply to. Now, they did leave it open for other counties and jurisdictions to have more restrictions if they wanted to. The county of, so that leads us down to the county. So the county only requires, when it comes to specifically for film production, they require that productions have to comply with what's called the County of San Diego Safe Reopening Plan. Now, I don't know, I think on a slide later on down the line, you're going to see a screenshot of it, and I'll dive into it. I don't think that's necessary right this second, but the Safe Reopening Plan is basically a broad COVID safety protocols checklist for any essential business that's operating during the pandemic throughout San Diego County. This does apply to film, TV, music, and photography productions that are taking place throughout the county. So what does this mean for you as you're looking to film on private property or on public property? All productions have to complete the safe reopening plan for your filming locations. Make sure you will also have to complete it for your production office space if you have a studio, if you have a production office somewhere in the county, but you're also going to need to fill it out for your filming locations. So if you're filming at a private residence or a business, if you're filming out on a public street and you need to apply for a film permit, you are going to need to complete it. The safe reopening plan is very broad. It is not intended to be specific to film production. So there's going to be some items on there that you're going to see on that checklist that don't apply because it's intended for any business. And that's whether it's food and beverage, hotels and lodging, dry cleaners or anything like that. Any business that's allowed to operate, essentially. So some of the things in there that you're going to see that just don't apply are things like, having signage that you're posted up, like your safe reopening plan posted at the entrance to your business. Obviously, if you're filming on location, there's no way to do that. The workaround would be having a copy of that accessible. You can designate a production manager or a location manager or just somebody, a designated contact with your production to have those things accessible on site in case somebody asks for it, somebody needs to review it. You'll have to provide a copy of your safe reopening plan once you've completed it to all of the cast, crew, and individuals who are going to be on set. And you'll also, if you're applying for a film permit on public property, whether it's the county, the city, or the port, you'll need to provide it to us as part of your permit application.
Robin, will you flip to the next slide?
Oh, and one important thing to note about the county's safe reopening plan, because it's intended to be broad, it's really the high points that it's looking at are PPE. In other words, all the employees who are going to be on site are going to be wearing masks, physical distancing, sanitation protocols, that sort of signage, that sort of thing. We'll get into the film specific requirements, which is really what our supplemental guidelines at the city level are going to be geared towards.
And I believe that's on the next slide.
So here's what the city of San Diego's guidelines really touch on. We knew that when we reached out to the state and the county, and I won't get into the politics of what it took for the state and the county to decide who was going to be coming out with guidelines. Part of why the city developed them is because we knew the state wasn't going to be releasing them. I think the state had known that the white paper was going to be coming out and wanted to defer to that document because it is exhaustive. I think it's a 75-page document. For those of you later on down the line, I think, Jane, you and your team are going to be sending out links and resources with the presentation. So if you wanted to access and read the white paper, you can. It is exhaustive, which is great because for productions who have the bandwidth and the resources and the budget, it gets down to the granular detail of safety protocols for everything from hair and makeup pods, your zones, and all of that business. Going back to the City of San Diego supplemental guidelines, these were intended, as I mentioned before, to be a little looser, which isn't to say they're it's meant to be we wanted it to be non-restrictive while still providing some level of safety specifically for film. So some key points that I want to point out on this slide as you're reading it, we do require facial coverings for all crew that are going to be on site, but we do make an exception for on-camera talent while they're actively being filmed. Everybody's still got a physical distance. There still needs to be access to hand washing and sanitation stations on site. So if you're going to be really quick at a location and you won't necessarily have hand washing stations and restrooms, you should have some kind of sanitation station set up for hand sanitizer and that sort of thing, disinfecting wipes and that sort of thing. Now, what I really want to touch on, though, is the cast and crew limits of 15 per location. That is part of the City of San Diego supplemental guidelines. So as you're looking to film on public property, throughout the city of San Diego. We are essentially saying that you have to limit each location that you're permitting has to be limited to 15 cast and crew total at each location. However, we do allow exceptions to that. Jane, I don't know if you want me to touch on this now or later. I think you had another question about it later on, but I'm happy to delve into it right now.
With regard to location and geography? Yeah, go ahead and touch on that now. Thanks, Brandy.
So really some of the considerations of what we look into when we're looking at a waiver and exception to the limit. We're looking at, does the location or the venue that you're asking for, does it provide enough space to physical distance? Can you provide us with diagrams that are going to demonstrate how your equipment's set up, how your cast and crew set up? Basically, what is your diagram looking like to make sure that your setup is going to be, and your footprint is going to be safe? Will you be using pods and zones? We actually had probably one of the largest productions that we've had throughout the pandemic was a very large commercial shoot that filmed in Scripps Ranch and in Mission Hills. We did allow them to have an exception for their cast and crew count because their cast and crew count total, I think, was 50 or 60 people. They went above and beyond because they were a larger budget production and their scope and scale was quite substantial. They used they basically rented businesses and homes throughout Scripps Ranch and Mission Hills and created pods on patios and interior restaurant spaces with cast and crew that didn't mix with each other, but they all needed to be there. They all needed to have a space to break when they weren't actively on set. And that was sufficient for us. And also, one of the things that we also consider is the location. Is this a community that's particularly sensitive, that even pre-pandemic wouldn't have been film friendly to begin with? That's part of why I've included my contact information there. And I don't know if we have another slide with my cell phone number as well. I will share that in the chat with you. But always reach out to me. Either call me on my office line, call or text me on my cell phone, shoot me an email at film@sandiego.gov. Before you even start filling out paperwork or going down this mess, I'm happy to walk you through all of this individually, one-on-one. I'm happy to share with you some of the context of maybe what have been the experiences with productions in the past that have filmed in maybe some of the more challenging neighborhoods in San Diego. Some things that you should be aware of to pre-plan so you're not caught by surprise or you're not filling out things that you don't need to be filling out.
Okay, I believe I'm unmuted now. Sorry, we had a little doggy barking in the background. Thank you, Brandy, for that. And Robert, I noticed that you were shaking your head in agreement with some of the things that Brandy was saying. And I also know that when you and I did a pre-interview for this, you talked a lot about thinking of COVID protocols as risk management and just the importance of having safety in mind and sometimes needing to suggest a client does things differently or even suggest that they postpone or don't do the shoot at all. Can you speak a little bit to the idea of risk management before we start talking about, we are working, companies are working, I know you're working, but you're also doing it with a real eye and ear toward safety.
Well, thank you. That's a big answer. Yeah, I think how we've approached it is from the safety perspective, number one, number two, and number three. As I mentioned earlier, safety is number one. This thing's scaring the crap out of everyone, and people have been really affected by it. So the last thing we wanted to do is put any of our employees in harm's way. Now, what that means is we've had to rethink our productions. I mentioned the production that got pushed. That production was outside, as Brandy mentioned. We had a bunch of different locations, but with stuff like that, we decided to really be as safe as possible. And what that included was having just a minimal crew. I mean, we had a tiny crew, and we instantly, as soon as testing became available, we said everybody's going to get tested. It's just black and white. There are no non-test people on set. If one has a problem getting tested, then you're not on the production. And we did that fairly early on. I'm not sure that's a mandate for productions, but we did it pretty early on, and we got a couple grumbles, but we were just black and white about it. we didn't say, oh, well, can you take a test? We were like, you're taking a test. This is how we do production. If we don't, then we're not doing production. And it was as simple as that. And when you mentioned risk management, I mean, that's really what it was about to us is how do we bring the risk down? And while testing, it doesn't, obviously, our former president got it, and he got tested every couple of days. So it's not a fail-safe. That is just one component. It's actually probably the weakest component. Obviously, the two number ones are mask at all times, no exceptions. If you take your mask off once, hey, put that back on. If you take it off again, you're off the set. And social distancing. When Brandy was talking about locations, consider your locations. The reason why I was nodding is because we took locations almost completely out of our production toolkit. As far as like house locations, sometimes people rent Airbnbs to go and shoot in a house. Those locations are tiny. If you're shooting in a house, it's tiny. And we made a decision a while ago that we would not go to locations at all. We would either shoot in our studio or shoot on location. No exceptions. Now, when we spoke to our clients about that, we were half expecting them to, be kind of upset. We don't want to do that. These extra costs for all these things are too much, but we didn't really get that response. They're really on board with us, and surprisingly so. But it's a testament to them that they understand that this is bigger than any of us, and we have to do everything we can do to keep everyone safe. So we scaled down productions. Some we added budget to productions, but everyone was, everyone that we dealt with was really open to changing things to consider everyone's safety.
Good, thank you. Lisa and Rick, how about you? What was your experience in terms of thinking about COVID protocols and safety of the crew, safety of yourself, safety of talent, early in the process? I'm going to kind of shift into this idea of pre-production. So we've talked about that safety is important and what is necessary, but as you're starting to think about pre-production, like how are you thinking about it differently, knowing that all of these safety protocols are in place?
Well, I started doing a lot of research on COVID. I did the COVID compliance officer training. I took
you're frozen.
About the spread of the disease. Oh, now, hello.
You seem to be back.
Are we good now? Okay, so I just started researching the disease, the spread of the disease, and what we could do to be safe, and how we could change the way we ran our business. Renting out gear, renting out motorhomes, what we could supply to our crews to make them safe, and that's where Rick kind of comes in.
We added, we took one of our coaches and actually added a second door. This proven to be really helpful on shoots. So people can come in one way, go out the other. A lot of times what happens is nowadays, there's not many people using the RV only for bathroom or minimal, everybody goes in separately. So like hair and makeup would go in with one talent, they'd go in the back door. So no one else is really using in the coach, except if somebody wanted to come in, use the restroom, they'd go in the back door straight in, never going into the rest of the coach. We also made custom hand sanitizers that we put outside the coach. We started researching hand washing stations. That was huge. That was like a big thing. Brandy will tell you, as this became part of protocol. We now have those available on set. We take one with us everywhere we go on our projects. It sits right outside the door, so people don't have to come into a confined space. That really was, I think, in PPE, we started carrying, we had to research finding the best prices on all the supplies. I mean, masks, shields, hand sanitizer, gloves, So now we have a big pile of that sitting around, waiting to be used. But those were just all of the things that come into play to keep our business flowing.
Have you had to request that a client changes any of their creative in terms of thinking about COVID safety?
I don't think so.
I think most of our clients have safety in mind when they're planning their projects. Most of our clients are planning their projects to be outdoors. And
90% of our projects are outdoors. So we're out on location somewhere. So we don't really have confined spaces unless we're in a house. And there's definitely been some changes with that of who's allowed in the house and during filming.
So you just had to do more sort of safety awareness on the existing kinds of shoots that you were doing. You've kind of added a layer of complexity and safety and expense, I'm sure, to what you were already doing.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. So, Thierry, when you and I talked, you mentioned that you have been thinking about creative in a different way for some of your clients, that as soon as the project is assigned to you, or you start talking with a client about a project, that you start brainstorming how to do it in maybe a different way. Can you talk a little bit about that? How pre-production is really changed on some of your projects?
Yeah, I mean, I think it, obviously, like anything in a shoot, right? The more prepared you are, at the very beginning stage, the better it's gonna end up being. The better you'll be able to deliver exactly what the client wants. And safety is obviously, it was always part of it, but now it's taken to another level. I think it is important to think of the creative, to think of the script, and to think about it in a way that we're like, okay, when we're going to shoot this, do we need to be in a confined space? If we do, how can we make it so that there is a very limited amount of people in that confined space and everybody else is somewhere else? It's very project specific. It's very script specific. But yeah, keeping that in mind, from the very, very beginning is very important. I think, beyond all the other things that everybody else touched on, right? I mean, we've implemented testing as well, masks, obviously, social distancing as much as possible. So you do all the things that are in your toolkit, and then you just dial the little things you can dial to make sure that you're never in a situation where, you could be at risk for unnecessary reason, right? I mean, I think the thing to keep in mind is that you're never going to have zero risk, right? Zero risk is you stay home and you don't go out and shoot. You don't do it at all. So there's always going to be some level of risk, but it's all about mitigating that as much as possible, so that you can finish your day and be like, okay, well, I have produced what my client wanted me to produce, and at the same time, I've done everything in my power to make sure that my crew and and everybody on set is safe, right?
Right. When we talked, you mentioned that you had a project, perhaps relatively early in the pandemic, where the budget was, let's say, $30,000, and you knew that you were going to need a certain percentage of that for PPE and testing. And so you mentioned that you kind of retooled the creative to still have a fabulous project, but that you could do for, let's say, $25,000 instead. Can you talk about that a little bit? That if the budget is defined and approved, that you may need to use some creativity in order to meet the client needs, as well as meet the budget.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, obviously the main thing that is expensive right now is testing, right? Well, now we're getting into a phase where you can get it for free through the county, but it still takes 2 to 4 days. So it's not necessarily, convenient for a shoot, for a 1 day or 2 day commercial shoot, right? But you do have, rapid testing that can be done within 30 minutes that people can do the day before. And, that's what we've done. The problem is that it does cost, about, I want to say right now, it's like $180 per person. So, if you just have a crew of 10, you're already at almost $2,000. So definitely for, mid-size, smaller budget, it's important to have that in mind. Now, when writing a script, when figuring out a shot list, finding a way to save $2,000 sometimes is just about, what type of shot you're gonna decide to do, right? I don't know. You want to do a complicated crane shot, that's gonna cost you more than $2,000. So maybe don't do that. Scale down to something a little simpler that can still achieve the creative or the intention of your client, and that will save that budget for safety that you can put now into the COVID testing and PPE. I think my experience with my clients, at least, is that nobody really cares that much about the minute details of how you do the shoot and exactly what the shot is. What they want is the intention, the story, the feel and the vibe that comes out of whatever you're producing. And so we did those minute adjustments a little bit, making sure we're not going to use the more fancy equipment, for instance, so that we can have that extra margin for testing. Yeah, we did that pretty early.
Well, and now that we're a little deeper into the pandemic, I think we're more aware of what those costs are going to be, and we can talk to clients about what those might be. I think when we spoke about this particular project, you had an approved budget. So you had to work with that number. At that time, clients weren't necessarily quite as open to like, oh, we're going to need an extra $5,000. So you found a way to make it work. And now I think that what I'm hearing is that clients are willing to at least understand that the price of COVID is adding dollars to a budget.
I've had the same experience as Rob, with clients being very, very supportive of it, very understanding of it. I actually had, even more than that, I think, people that I've talked to where, it proves that you care about your crew and your company and the people that you work with, right? And in some ways, I think it reflects on your relationship with your clients, right? Because if you care about your crew and you want to make sure that everybody's safe and everybody's healthy, in some ways, I think it tells your client that you'll care about them, right? You'll do the best you can for them as well. I've had very good feedback. And then, sometimes there is a budget limitation, right? Where they're like, okay, well, that's all we have, right? We have that amount of money and we can't spend more. And then it's just about talking, going back into the creative and being like, yeah, let's tool that. Then let's change some small things, that will still achieve the right intention, the right overall creative while saving, a few $1,000s so that we can make sure that everybody's tested.
Mm-hmm. Robert, how would you say that scheduling of a shoot day or shoot days and budgeting has changed for you in the last year or so?
Well, certainly it takes longer to do things during the day. A normal shoot day, let's say you have an 8-hour shoot day, 10-hour shoot day. From what we've found, it's at least 25% more, in many cases, 50% more. So it's longer, it costs more, and it's a tough thing to tell clients, but it's just reality, and they get it too. At least we're lucky enough to have clients that do.
Where are you seeing that time? Is it setup time? Yes,
it's pretty much across the board. Certainly setup time, because typically we'd have art director in there at the same time as all the lighting people. And we've had to do them in shifts. So whether that means we have a prep day, the first part of the day, maybe art direction, second part of the day might be the lighting crew, where before we'd be able to do it much quicker. So and that's to limit the amount of people on set. It's really across the board, even during filming. You have to be aware of your surroundings, and you can't just run up to the actor and say, hey, do it like this, or you just can't do that. So you have to really think about it. Obviously you have compliance officers, or at the beginning we didn't have compliance officers. We just had a PA who's assigned to pretty much yell at everyone if they're too close to each other. Yeah, it's different, and as Thierry was talking, you find ways to get around it. A lot of what we've done in the creative phase, as he mentioned, it's really attuned to our reality. Like I said before, we shoot outside or on our stage. I mean, luckily we have a stage, obviously, but our stage is quite large, so we can have a certain amount of people and feel fairly safe with a lot of ventilation. It kind of puts a hamper on us. Obviously, it puts a hamper on everyone, but there are ways to do it. My thing is just keep people away from each other. And, if you do that, make sure they have masks. We have a ton of PPE too. We have so many face masks that there's no way we'll ever be able to use them all. So if anyone needs a face mask, give me a call.
Thank you for that.
Sure.
So, Rick and Lisa, you mentioned that you do most of your shooting outside, and I know that you have recently been doing some work with automotive manufacturers. What are you finding in terms of time? Is time changing in terms of setup, just even allowing for that check-in time at the beginning of the day?
Yeah, it's actually, it's gotten much better. I think we're getting better at it. Usually about an hour extra. We have somebody set up on this last shoot. They had somebody doing testing, the antigens testing right as you approach set, which worked out great. It was very fast. We just scheduled people, slowly to filter into set. We also, on that project, they had everybody do the PPR test prior to the day before, prior to the shoot. So we were really covering ourselves with testing.
Okay. And I was just asking Robin if he could, if we could have him share his screen and show us. You actually have put together a packet of paperwork that you send out to crews in advance. Rick acknowledgement. That should say risk acknowledgement. So I apologize for that. That was my typing a little earlier today. So risk acknowledgement. But tell us a little bit about this paperwork and how having the crew fill this out in advance has been helping, and what other compliance protocols you're following in advance and on set specifically.
So at the beginning of a production, as a COVID compliance officer, I'll send this paperwork out to everyone on the crew with an introductory email explaining that I'm the COVID compliance officer and what my duties are and what my expectations are of the crew, and that they need to read this and follow protocols, the COVID protocols. All of this paperwork came from the COVID compliance class that I took through the health education organization, and it is available to anyone that takes that class. So, I just went through it and mainly modified it to fit, our needs, but mostly it's the same as what they send out. The most important part of it is the health screening and having the people be honest about whether they have symptoms or not, or if they've come in contact with anyone. In my introductory email, I try to encourage them to have open communication with me as a COVID compliance officer, so that they feel comfortable if they do come down with symptoms, or if they do come in contact with someone, they'll come to me so we can figure out what we're going to do for the rest of the production and the rest of the crew to keep everyone safe.
So a typical day on set, people have filled out these documents. Are you doing temperature checks on site? Are you doing testing on site? Tell us a little bit about the setup that you have.
So usually I get there first and set up a table where I have a checklist of everyone that's on the crew. And then we definitely do temperature checks. I check and make sure I have all their paperwork, and just get an overall feel for them, let them know I have PPE, make sure they get a new mask. That's important. a lot of people don't realize that, you know, they might wear the same mask, you know, from the day before over and over again. So for me, I feel better if I give them a brand new disposable mask, so I know that they're not bringing something, you know, to the rest of the crew. So I always make sure I have masks and encourage people to use.
Throughout the day, we'll come around and ask, give them a fresh mask. It happens a lot on set.
Yeah. So, and then we have hand sanitizer, and I just encourage them to use hand sanitizer when they're touching equipment. I have a spray bottle of alcohol. I'll come and offer to spray down equipment for people.
And that's pretty standard nowadays with COVID compliance officers. They'll come around with hand sanitizer and squirt it in your hand, and you just kind of like, everybody just kind of accepts that.
Yeah.
Oh, she comes again with the hand sanitizer. It happens a lot. That's kind of a common thing, and the mask changing. A lot of the COVID compliance officers, Lisa and as one, will give out little packets of just all the goodies, PPE stuff.
Yeah, in fact, we have a slide. You sent me some photos of what it is that you have been passing out. So tell us what we're seeing here.
Okay, well, up in the top left corner, that is a standard kind of a setup nowadays for our COVID compliance officer. You can see one of our production coaches in the background. If you look real closely, you'll see one of our hand sanitizer stations. We kind of set that up just about on every shoot. It's a hand washing station. So basically people don't have to come into the RV if they're just going to go or wash their hands, or want to put their own hand sanitizer on or get a new mask. We kind of just set up a little table there, just in another spot that just like a COVID compliance officer would. Over here on the right side, this is something that came on early on when this all went down. Of course, just like everybody, we were kind of bored, not doing anything. And I was approached by a company in Los Angeles that knew I had designed several production coaches. And so they asked us if we'd be interested in designing some COVID testing trailers. So that's what came out of it. That was our first trailer we built. We built two. That was a 5-station COVID testing trailer that we did. Over on the left-hand side, you'll see one of those packets that I was talking about. That just has all the PPE goodies that you hand out that you hope people use on set, but most people take them home and put them in their car or wherever. And then there's our hand washing station setup. Door we added in one of our coaches. And I think that's, what else do we have there?
So Lisa, Rick, have you been
more pictures of our testing trailer?
Have you been working with a lot of talent on set? And what's that relationship like between the crew and the talent?
So as a COVID compliance officer, I have been on several shoots with.
No, I think you've locked up again.
Willing to do whatever you ask them to do. They're just happy to be there.
Okay. Okay, well, I think you might be locked up again. So let's go back to Robert for just a second. Robert, you were talking to me about all of the protocols that you have in place. And in fact, 10 Stories put together a video, a client-facing video, but it's actually of interest to all of us who are kind of interested to see what's going on behind the scenes. So I think Tom's got that video. Why don't we take a look at that?
Great.
Here we go. Stand by.
The 10 Story shoot day protocols.
And we produced this when we were not working. So
associates. Like just about everyone, the pandemic has prompted us to rethink how we provide in-person services. In particular, we feel it's important to share with you how we'll be handling in-studio production on what we call shoot days. So let's step inside the shoes of someone stepping on set, and we'll give you an idea of what to expect from their point of view. When you arrive at 10 stories, you'll notice we occupy suites 2 and 3. Suite 2 is mostly dedicated to pre and post-production, while Suite 3 is how you'll enter and gain access to our studio. When you enter Suite 3, you'll be greeted from a distance by one of our producers or assistants. We'll request that you arrive with your own mask, but if you're unable, we'll provide one to you. Personal protective equipment like masks, gloves, and hand sanitizing stations will be strategically placed at entrances and around the studio, along with socially distanced seating. If you're going to be on camera during a shoot day, it may be necessary to visit wardrobe, followed by hair and makeup before you make your way to the set. Depending on our collective comfort level, we may skip these steps and request that you arrive camera ready. As you step out of Suite 3 and into the studio, you'll notice 2 stages, as well as a kitchen space and even more designated seating. Depending on the size of the production, the only people you'll probably find on set will be a director and a camera operator. If you're on set as a client, we'll try to have a separate monitor so you can observe what's being filmed from a safe distance. Between takes or during breaks, we'll have individually packaged food and beverage items available in the kitchen. While on set, we'll politely request that you don't congregate in any particular area and that you observe social distancing either seated around the studio or outside in the parking lot. In general, we'll be requiring everyone inside our studio to wear a mask except while being filmed or consuming food. We'll also be requiring social distancing except for on-camera or on-set purposes or when participating in the process of wardrobe and/or hair and makeup. In addition, we'll be regularly urging people to wash their hands or use hand sanitizer. Along with common sense behavior, we feel confident that we can achieve a safe filming environment until government recommendations and public consensus indicate that we can relax our policies. Most importantly, we want you to feel safe when visiting our studio. If you have any questions or concerns about these and additional policies we're enacting, please visit our blog for further information or email us directly. Thank you.
So, Robert, do you have, when you first mentioned this video to me, I was thinking that you had maybe like the big circles like they have in the supermarkets that kind of show where 6 feet is. Or are we all just kind of getting on to how far apart 6 feet is from one another?
Yeah, we didn't go that far. We didn't, put the circles down. Although I probably wanted to. No, I think everyone on set, they know what's going on, and we don't have a problem telling people to separate. We don't have a problem telling people to move away. I think that's important to tell everyone is that when it comes to safety, don't worry about making people angry or anything. To me, it's really black and white. It's either safety or you're not here because you're risking the safety of everyone else. Mm-hmm. So we're pretty hardcore about it, but we still have a good time. It's definitely interesting how things are done, but everyone's happy to work, and we've produced several things. Although that's my dog behind me. Sorry about that. We've produced a lot of things, typically with a much smaller crew.
Mm-hmm. Now, what are you doing about testing? I'd like to ask actually all 3 of you, all 4 of you, what you're doing in terms of testing. So, Robert, what are you using?
Well, we'll start. We're using the COVID clinic downtown. We have since this whole thing started. It is quite expensive, but it's a rapid test. It's not as accurate as the longer test, which I also want to stress to everyone that a test doesn't mean that one doesn't have the virus. A test is just another thing that we can mitigate risk. It's really about masks and social distancing. Even if one has a virus and we follow our protocols, then nothing should happen. So we're always thinking about that. As far as testing, from the beginning, everyone gets tested no matter what, even every client.
Okay.
And sometimes that's a hard one, but we did have a project where the people didn't want to be tested, and we told them, well, we're not going to do the production unless you get tested, which Didn't go over well, but I think they understood at the end. And you know, when we talked to them on set, they said, well, you know, I'm glad you did that because it's just safety for everyone. So, you know, you just have to do these things. And, you know, if you look at it really black and white and there's no gray area, it'll make you less insane too. If you just have a ground set of rules and you just follow those. Some of our protocols are based on the color level. In purple, it's less people. And then once we go down go down level, then we open up a little bit more. But if you just have rules and follow them, I think everyone respects that.
Thierry, how about you? How are you managing testing?
Yeah, I mean, the same as Rob. Actually, I started doing testing at the same COVID clinic downtown. I want to say in September, October. Actually, it came from 10th Story. I didn't know about them. I was looking for it before that, but I couldn't find anything that was fast, right? Because that's the issue. It's one thing if you can't set up bubbles and you can really isolate people online and you have a 20-day shoot, then great. Test people 3-4 a week before the first day of shoot. That's fine. Tell them to isolate. If they're going to work for 20 days, they'll probably do it. The type of project that I do are 1 day, 2-day shoots. So it was just not realistic to tell my crew and my talent to isolate completely for a week before 1 day shoot, right? Maybe they have other projects. Maybe they just have stuff going on in their life, right? So I did start looking, I want to say in July, it was very early, like in June, July, when I started shooting again, finding tests, right? Finding tests that would be quick. Either that would be quick and we would have to pay, or that would be free, maybe a little longer and free. And, until September, there really was no option. There was just not enough tests and you couldn't get tested, right? So as soon as it became available, I did exactly the same as, Rob, just asking everybody to get tested. My experience with the crew and the clients has always been very positive. Like most people have had, at the very minimum, a big 2 to 3 months break in work. So whether it's crew, talent, everybody's really happy to come work, right? And so it's not a big deal, right? The COVID clinic that we were talking about downtown, it's literally you stay in your car, it takes 5 minutes, and then you get the answer in a text or an email within 30 minutes. So it's really easy to do. It's not a big ask, and so people have been very open to doing it. So yeah, it hasn't been an issue at all. The only thing is, it costs more money. And so, what we were saying earlier is just, you need to adapt a little bit your budget for it. But yeah, it's been pretty easy.
If I could just add on to that too. One thing that we did find was many of our employees didn't want to go get tested the day before because they have to go out, it's a whole nother day. I mean, what if they're doing something else? So just recently, we're doing all the COVID tests prior to the production day. So let's say I have a shoot on Friday and the shoot's at 9:30. Well, I'm going to go get a COVID test at 8 a.m. It does a couple things. One, it keeps everything in 1 day. And secondarily, you want to get the test as close to the production day as possible so that, it's actually the most recent. If you take a test a week before, that really doesn't mean anything to me because obviously you could pick up the virus within that week. I did see a comment pop in about legal liability. And if I could just briefly mention that, I think what's really important, what Brandy outlined, was you need to follow all that stuff, no matter what. You have to do all that. Testing isn't a mandate, but I would recommend if you're worried about legal liability, I would definitely do that. I would definitely mandate testing and really just follow all the protocols that we've been talking about. One thing, if you can push the shoot, you might want to push it. It's a tough thing because we all have to live. We all have to make a living, and it's a really tough time and saying, hey, we're just not comfortable shooting that. Maybe we should, do you really need this? Is there another thing you could do? that might be something to consider as well. We've had many crew members decline to work, and I 100% respect that. It's a tough thing, but you have to follow, for legal liability, you have to follow the rules. I don't think anyone knows what the legal liability is because, to my knowledge, no one's been sued for unsafe workplace, but you could certainly be sued for an unsafe workplace if you don't follow these protocols.
I think to tap onto that too, Rob, you bring up a lot of really good points, and I'm going to draw back to something that Rick and Lisa had brought up earlier on. It's not just following these protocols. You should be from the perspective of the production, you should be documenting everything. So those 3 forms that Lisa with San Diego Productions had, that's kind of a good model for something that you should be tracking as your production. You can designate a person, whether it's a COVID safety compliance officer. If you don't have that, then a production manager or your first AD, who's going to be tracking all of that paperwork and making sure that you have that all tight. On top of really reiterating to everybody who's on set, we're glad to be working. Nobody wants to be, no production right now wants to, or ever wants to be the cause of an outbreak, because that would send ripple effects throughout the industry. And so far, knock on wood, that hasn't happened in San Diego. We haven't had any outbreaks that were tied to a specific production. And we are tracking that. But you should be, from a production standpoint, and limiting your liability, because there always is going to be, to Thierry's point, there's always going to be a level of risk, right? We walk out the door, there's going to be a level of risk just going to the grocery store. So as a production, you have the safety protocols in place to make sure your cast and crew are safe, and you're documenting that you're keeping them safe. And that's really, truly, that's what you need to be doing.
Very good. Thank you. Rick and Lisa, I wanted to talk to you a little bit more about testing. Just knowing that a lot of your work is happening out in the field and not in the studio. And I also know that you've been doing some traveling. I think you mentioned that you had been, you're not necessarily working right here near downtown. So what are your perspectives on testing?
Well, we found that most of our clients are real receptive to the rapid tests. They're happy to do it. But we just had a case where we were out in the desert. So we ended up needing PCR tests for our crew. And we had some crew members that were coming in late. So we went back to our medical labs that we had conference calls with when we built the COVID testing trailers. And we ended up partnering with one of them so we could actually provide PCR tests for our crew members with a 24-hour notice. So we can actually come out to a crew, test people. We have a runner that takes it back to a lab, and then we have results by the next day. We found that it really helped us out when we were out at the desert because we didn't have a rapids test that we could send crew members to right there. So we brought the lab to them.
So knowing that I believe that we're going to get back to work at some point, I don't know that it's going to be February, but it's going to be at some point. And knowing that the two of you you're currently working, a number of us are currently working. How would we be able to get that kind of on the spot testing? Is that?
I could jump in on that. COVID Clinic, the one we go downtown, they provide that service. They actually bring a health practitioner out along with the machine. So you can pay them, but you have to have a certain amount of people. I think it's like 30, 40 people, something like that. Okay. So it's a lot of people.
There's definitely companies. That's the whole thing. When we were out at the desert, we had a company that we looked into, but it was $450 for that test. So it just was not really cost effective for if you had, a half a dozen people that needed to be tested. It just wasn't really cost effective for us. So that's why we've took out that fee by going directly to the lab.
Got it. Okay. I think I want to move on to some Q&A because I've been kind of moderating this discussion. I haven't been paying a lot of attention to what's in the Q&A. But Jeff or David, what do we have lined up in terms of some questions?
Well, we had Dan Roper. Dan, I don't know if you're still here. He had a question, pardon me, about who to be looking to. I know you would like them to answer questions. Dan, are you still here? I don't see him. So he had a question for Brandy. Is there any idea as to who we should be looking to for officially lifting all of these guidelines? You may not know the answer to this. And as unlikely as it is, have you heard of even tentative time that we might expect that?
Thanks, David. And yes, Dan, actually, he direct messaged me shortly afterward to clarify his question. So he was specifically asking for, is there, not so much because I think we all know at this point, there's no timeline. I think back in March, we thought there's no way this is still going to be shut down by the end of summer. And here we are in 2021. So we can't and I won't project on timelines because it's ultimately going to depend on when we're at the lowest tier. And when the vaccines are more readily available, which is the other hat that I'm wearing right now. So, but what Dan had clarified with his question was who is ultimately going to be making the announcement that the supplemental guidelines and these other restrictions are going to be lifted. And that would come from the City of San Diego's film office. So that would be me. Jane, as you know, I'll be sending out broadcast and communications to all of the San Diego film groups, including, of course, San Diego Media Pros. And we'll also be sending out bulletins to MPSAs to the media as well. So everybody should be getting that messaging.
But with no idea of when that might happen.
No.
Look forward to that day.
Yes, we all do. David, what else do we have in terms of questions?
I apologize if I'm butchering the name. Vesna Vasic had a question about who to go to. Vesna, are you there?
Yes, I'm here. Yeah. So I want to add on a question. What if we come in person on set? Do we know of the protocols? What we have to do?
So you're asking if you're a crew member working on a set, how will you know what the protocols are that you're expected to follow? Okay.
Yes. How and when?
Lisa, do you want to answer that?
Sure. Well, in most of the COVID compliance officers will send the protocols out ahead of time by email. And also they should have them posted on set when you arrive and be able to explain them to you. What the protocols are, where to go, about the masks and where hand sanitizers are, where the hand washing stations and bathrooms are, and be able to answer any of your questions.
When you show up on set, that's the first person that you'll see is the COVID compliance officer.
Very good. Awesome. Thank you. Thank you, Vesna, for your question.
No problem.
And we have one more from Jeffrey Lehman. Are you still with us, Jeffrey?
Yeah, I'm here. I actually have two questions. One is on the 15-person limit. Is that at any given moment, Brandy? For example, my 19-year-old cousin did some acting before Christmas for a couple of weeks, and they had them waiting in their car until they were actually performing. And so they didn't have too many people on the set at any given moment. The film that I'm a producer on right now, we just are waiting to see what happens. But there may be times when you're counting crew and cast that we would be above that 15, but not at any given shot.
Hi, Jeffrey, that's a great question. And yeah, so it's at any given time. So if you've got some people coming and going throughout the day, provided they're not mixing with other casting crews or pods if you're using them. And also it's one thing to keep in mind, because I know this question has been asked of me multiple times for folks who are pulling permits. Does the casting crew count also include, let's say, traffic controllers or fire marshals? And it does not. So it's just what your production is bringing on site.
Excellent. And my second question is, from what we understand from working with SAG, if one person ends up being COVID positive, that the entire cast and crew is supposed to quarantine for 2 weeks, and that we're responsible for paying full wages for those 2 weeks. That's really the biggest stumbling block for us, because it would just blow our budget out of the water.
Yeah, that's a great question. And it brings up a really good contrast, because if your production is a union signatory, in other words, you've got crew from IATSE, you've got crew from Teamsters or Local 399. If you've got SAG-AFTRA talent, then there's a whole level of other requirements you're going to have to meet as a signatory. Those were the documents that were included earlier on in the presentation that are like 75 pages long, and they're really, really specific about what kind of protocols you need to have in place at all levels of pre-production and post. So that is correct, though, Jeffrey. That would be specific to a SAG shoot. And also one thing I want to give you an idea of what the requirements would be, because of course with the labor organizations, their primary focus and their goal is to ensure as much safety as possible for their membership. So that's why their protocols are so expansive and specific. In this particular case, I'll give you an example. So if you are a SAG shoot, you also have to quarantine, you have to pod your entire production and sequester them at whatever lodging or base, wherever you're going to be filming on location. For example, we had a SAG shoot that was going to be filming at a hotel in the Carlsbad area, and they were filming entirely on property, and they were looking at, because they were a SAG shoot, they had to arrive 2 weeks early with all of their cast and crew. Any of the personnel who were going to be on set had to sequester there for 2 weeks at the hotel. They could not leave. They had to get tested every 3 days, and testing had to continue on set while they were there for everybody there. Not every production has the resources or the budget. I don't know many that do, quite frankly, because it's huge. It's astronomical. But that is something that you would expect if you're a union signatory.
Yeah, I think at this point, the liability is just so incredible for kind of low budget productions. It's one of the reasons why I have a We Can Explore travel series, and we're not shooting. We're not going to shoot until this is over, because there's just no way I can kind of take on that liability for a low budget. And it's the same thing with this low budget film. There's just, these are just the initial liabilities of like 2 weeks. If somebody got sick, God forbid somebody ended up dying or having complications or something like that, that's additional, business liability. And I just don't know how you take that on, frankly.
Yeah, I think you have to weigh that, right? As each production is going to have to weigh that on their own. And to Rob's point earlier, it is a level of a risk assessment. You have to look at what kind of liability you're willing to take on. But at the same time, there are productions who want to get back to work. There's a need for more content. There's a need for content everywhere because streaming has just blown everything out of the water. So no one thinks about upfronts anymore. No one thinks about pilot season. They do to a certain extent, but that's just year round now. So I think that's part of why we as an industry want to keep moving, but at the same time, we want to do it safely. So that's going to be up to each production to decide.
Well, no, I totally understand for the high-end productions where, it's $1 million an episode, or it's a $100 million film or something like that. But when you're talking, in the low budget range, right, it's just not in the budget. And it's a lot of risk to take on.
Yeah. I think that's part of why we have such a great panel here today, because I think between Rob and Thierry and the folks with San Diego Productions, they can speak to productions that aren't the big budget major motion pictures. And they can speak to how you can go back to work in the film industry and do it safely. Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. And Rob Nauf, am I pronouncing that right? He has two questions, it looks like.
Hey everyone. Yeah, I just had a couple questions about let me see here. Sorry, I threw a couple there in the chat.
I was responding to yours.
Yeah, thank you, Rob. I appreciate that. Yeah, that one, I appreciate the answer. Obviously, I'm all for the testing and mitigating the risk. I was just curious if there was something that had been in courts that we're trying to avoid or whatever, but I totally get it. And I figured that was the answer, but I was just curious. It wasn't like I'm not anti the mask or the distancing.
No, but I think it's important to always, tell yourself that we can't, you can't let things go. You have to see this as a set of rules and follow every single one, because if you just don't do one, you're legally liable possibly, but number two, you're just opening up risks to everyone. And You know, I mean, the least risky thing is not to have a production, you know, as Jeffrey was talking about, which, you know, that's a decision every company, you know, should make. You know, obviously a smaller crew is less risk. Shooting outside is less risk. Shooting on a stage is less risk. So I think if you come to all these different viewpoints, you know, as a business owner, you can make that decision of whether it's right for you.
Yeah, I agree.
If I can add something to that, I think it's, you know, it's important to remember that, you know, your liability will come in play just if you're sued, right? But if you're sued and you can prove, like Rob said earlier, that you've done everything in your power to limit as much as possible, to the extent of the, you know, known science, the risks that you put on your crew, then, you know, you limit that much more your liability. There's not really, you know, an example or a history of, you know, lawsuits that could say, oh, you need to do X, Y, and Z to be covered. But, you know, just do the best you can with the breadth of information that you have at any given time. And then, you know, hopefully it works. But yeah.
Well, and I would jump in and add on with what Brandy said, which is to document. To take photographs and keep your folders and just make sure that everything that you're doing to be safe and COVID compliant is well documented.
Awesome. Yeah, that's kind of what in line with what I was thinking as well. I'm just curious as far as with everyone that's been shooting during COVID and now with LA having the new strain and them halting production a few weeks back, has anyone heard anything about either the double mask thing or KN95 being a standard when you guys hand out the little goodie bags?
Well, 2 masks is better than 1. I'll tell you that right now. And I personally, you know, I like when people do that. We don't mandate that, but, you know, it's better. The N95s, you know, we haven't bought any just because, I mean, we have some, but they're quite expensive, but they're a short supply too.
Yeah.
And the hospitals need them.
To pop on really quickly. Hey, Rob. So part of why LA and the major studios did a halt to production back in December. The ICU capacities were so slim, and it wasn't so much just a risk from COVID. It's also understanding that for some of these productions that involve major stunts, there's a very high level of risk. It's why talking about, I think there's another question about insurance. It's why when you have pyrotechnics, when you have, you know, driving sequences, you have confrontation scenes, your level of insurance is going to be much more expensive because your shoot's not just a regular old dialogue scene. So part of why the major studios did a halt to production, and the unions also supported that, was because if your stunt coordinator or if your stuntsman gets hurt on set, he won't even get admitted into the ICU potentially, or he's going to be waiting for hours because it's so packed full from COVID patients. So that was also a consideration as well.
Got it.
Very good.
All right, and Mark, you had a question about Crafty.
Yeah. What are you guys doing about Crafty and meals for the crew? How are you approaching that with catering or with, you can obviously ordering a pizza, no one's just going to dig in. So how are you approaching that on your shoots?
Well, I can jump in on that. Pretty much bags. We just have bags for everyone. They pick up a bag, go somewhere where no one else is, and eat. Typically, we have them delivered. There's this place near our office that we use quite a bit, and each person has their own bag, so there's no collective food place. In that video we showed all these, you know, all the snacks and everything spread out, and that's typically what we do.
Yeah, same for me.
It's no fun anymore to come out to set because there's not a big craft service table full of food that you can just come up and grab. Everything is pre-bagged on our shoots. And even our lunches come box lunches. That's just how it is nowadays.
We've lost some of the social aspects of the meal breaks and the crafty table. That part's a shame.
It's kind of humorous if you come out to a big set and you see one person sitting at a 6-foot table, and you just see a big field of people sitting at their own little table.
Individual tables, everybody on their phone, right?
We had to buy more rental tables just because.
Well, good to know that you've got those available for rental too. So, all right. Well, we've only got just a couple of minutes left, and any final words? Rick, Lisa, any final words?
Well, whether your crew gets tested or not, I like to just tell myself everyone has the potential of having something they could give me, and I don't want to get it. So that's how I keep myself safe, and that's what I would encourage other people to do, is just imagine that they do have COVID, whether they do or they don't. You just don't want to get it, so you want to practice all the protocols to keep yourself safe.
That's right. I would parrot that. It's definitely treat everyone like they have COVID. I mean, it's really as simple as that.
Thierry, any final words?
I agree with everything that's been said. Yeah, it's just, use your best judgment. Obviously, follow all the protocols that we've put in place, that we've communicated to you. And then on top of that, just be mindful of it, right? I mean, that I know that in any call sheet that I send, there's a big bold red letter, notice that says exactly that. Just on top of everything else we've said, use your best judgment to make sure that you keep yourself safe and everybody else.
I think it's also important to tell people who could be part of your production that it's okay if you're not cool with it. It's okay not to be on the production. Don't feel like you need to be there. If it's not what you want to do, then that's okay.
It's not going to end your relationship necessarily with that producer, director, or production company to just decline.
That's right.
And tell them to contact you next time. Yeah. Brandy, any last words?
I think dovetailing on what everybody else is saying, I think we all know production is such a tactile, collaborative experience. So this is a completely foreign concept that's taken a really long time for all of us to adjust to. And I don't know, and while I know COVID's affected every single industry and every person, I don't know that there's any industry that's been able to be as flexible and nimble as the film industry in addressing and being able to continue moving on, right? In some way, shape, or form, even if it's at a smaller scale. But I would recommend, I dropped my contact information down in the chat, and I think Jane and her team are going to be sending out my contact information and links from the presentation out to everybody as resources. So please do not hesitate to reach out to me. If you're going to be looking at pre-planning, I mean, to Rick's point earlier, we were talking about, what packed lunches are looking like. You might be thinking you're so hyper-focused on film production, but talk to me about what your craft services is going to look like. If you need outdoor dining and you need to set up tables at a city park as your place to do your lunch service, then we can talk about what you're going to be doing for that. So reach out to us as a resource. I think, Jane, I also sent you a list of resources. One of the links that I had forwarded over to you, and I hope you share with the rest of the group, is the California Film Commission, the state's film commission, put together a resource page for basically all of the relief funds, all of the different financial assistance opportunities available to the film industry throughout the state. And that is a comprehensive list. So please do check that out if you do need financial assistance as you're looking for business here right now. And that's it.
Excellent. Robin, let's bring that if we can share your screen. We had just a couple of resources pages. One is just a reminder that on the sdmediapros.org website, under our resources page or our COVID page, we will have all of these links. And then, as Brandy mentioned, she had provided a number of links that we will also be sharing. So this is our website. Find us at sdmediapros.org, and then you can go to this page -18064, which is our resources page, or just go /COVID. And then on the next slide, we will provide links for all of these tips and resources that Brandy provided, including the Special Events Filming Department website, all the way down through the white paper, and all of these other industry-specific resources. So thank you, Brandy, for that, in addition to all of the other resources that we mentioned tonight.
Jane, all of the links are already on the COVID updates page on the website. I have posted that in the chat. And the slides there's a link to the slides on the event page from tonight. So those are already there.
Very good. Well, let's wrap things up then. I hope we answered all of the questions that were in the chat. If not, follow up with us and we will see what kind of information we can get for you. But in the meantime, I'd very much like to thank our panel tonight. Thierry Denis from Helium Films, and Robert Craighead from 10 Stories, Rick Drake and Lisa Drake from San Diego Productions, and Brandy Shimabukuro from the San Diego Special Events and Filming Office. So thank you to all of our panelists, and thank you to all of you for joining us. We will see you next month on Thursday, February 25th for our next meeting. So until then, stay well, be healthy, and keep us posted as to whether or not you're filming and how it's going. Thank you very much.
Jane, can I throw in one question?
Sure, Bob.
I just wanted to ask Brandy, with wearing the two hats she does, when did she expect that people that have been vaccinated might be able to be, are they going to be treated differently? And how do you see that pool of people as that moves forward?
No, I don't see that there's going to be any special treatment or anything like that for people who have been vaccinated. Really, truly on set, it's going to be everybody's responsibility to abide by the safety protocols until everything's lifted.
Very good.
There you go. Jane, are you going to take your usual photo?
Oh, yeah, we should do that.
Yeah.
Thank you. Let's get
I've been waiting
back
for
to a
that.
gallery.
That's the only reason I'm here.
You've been sitting there smiling, Tom, for the last, just in case I wanted to grab a quick snapshot. All right, everyone, looking right into your cameras and a big smile so we have something to post on social media. David, Wendy. Oh, Wendy, you mentioned that you weren't going to be showing your smiling face tonight. All right, here we go. 1, 2, 3. All right, I got 3 of them. Hopefully we've got a great photo.
In one of them, it's okay.
Okay, well, that's the one we'll use, Tom.
All right, everybody. Good seeing everyone.
Thanks for having us.
Gosh.
Great seeing you. Thank you very much.
Bye, everybody.
Yes, thank you so
Great
much.
stuff.
Appreciate it.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
See you next month.